Tony Leonardi and the Youngstown State University Jazz Ensemble.
Welcome back to the Tony Leonardi Legacy Interview Series. This episode features my interview with pianist, composer, and arranger James Weidman. James and I spoke in February of 2021, when at the time he was professor of jazz studies at William Patterson University. Since that time, he has relocated to Athens, Georgia, where he is now assistant professor of piano and African American studies at the University of Georgia. Prior to James' relocation, he resided in New York City for over 4 decades of his career, where he led and performed with numerous artists and was a member of Joe Lovano's Grammy-nominated band, Us Five. James was a member of the Youngstown State University Jazz Ensembles under my father's direction from 1975 to 1976. During this time, he performed with such jazz legends as James Moody, Max Roach, Woody Herman, Slide Hampton, Pepper Adams, and many, many others. Here's my interview with James Weidman.
Thanks so much for inviting me for this. I've been looking forward to it.
Oh, so have I. Thank you so much. So what have you been up to lately?
Well, I've been teaching at William Patterson University a couple times a week, doing a little writing. I have a trio project that I need to finish, but with everything that has been going on in the past year with the pandemic, that sort of was put on the back burner. But hopefully in a couple months, I'll lay the complete tunes for it and we'll put that situation out. I was actually doing it out in my home, and we had some really nice tracks. So besides that, and staying out of harm's way and doing some writing, composing, yeah, that's been about the deal lately.
Yeah. Well, that's good. You're keeping busy. I'm glad to hear that.
Oh yeah, and it has presented new opportunities too. For instance, in 2019, I accepted a position with a church. Now, they have a string orchestra, youth string orchestra. So just a couple months ago, I said, I never really wrote for strings before. And they actually performed it this past Sunday. Young people.
Great.
Yeah, they're high school age, I guess you could say, maybe some younger. And they did a very good job. And I was happy. So you have these new opportunities, things that you might not normally do that you end up doing.
This evening, I wanted to kind of go back in time with you and reflect on your beginning in jazz, at least at YSU. And if you wouldn't mind telling me how you started out in the jazz program there and what got you into jazz to begin with and piano, where did it all start for you?
Okay, well, my father, coming from Meridian, Mississippi, and coming from a segregated school that had a music program, had this great enthusiasm for jazz music. So I remember hearing it very early in my life. I didn't know the names, basically, unless they were on television like Louis Armstrong and Count Basie and Duke Ellington. There are certain people who you knew, but I would hear this music, and I remembered it when people scat, I would laugh because I thought it almost sounded like baby talk, I suppose. But my father had a band, and there was this musician who was a doo-wop musician who showed me my first piano. It wasn't jazz or anything, but it ended up being the blues, especially when my father finished what he was doing. In fact, I'll just play it to give you an idea. It's the first thing I ever learned on the piano. And realized this guy, matter of fact, there's a video I saw of him. His name is George Wydell Jones, and he was on Shindig in the 1960s. And he wrote Rama Lama Ding Dang. And I remember when he brought the demo of the song. I would just look. He taught me this. Then my father said, you can do more. You know, play the whole changes. 5 years old. And then I took piano lessons later on. Yeah, I thought I was big guy. You know, I could do that, and I could play the boogie woogie, I could play, you know, I learned all those little things. But I also learned something about harmony just by playing that. So I took piano lessons. I discovered Charlie Parker at age 14, that I even had him at the house. There was a friend of mine, we had a band, we were high school mates. And I'm going to say his name. I need to tell him that I said his name because he probably doesn't even know this. Michael McClendon, whose father was Jimmy McClendon, a saxophone player. He said, we were playing, and he says, you know, Charlie Parker was the greatest musician that ever lived. I said, who's Charlie Parker? I had no idea, so I went home and I found these albums. And I was just like floored. In fact, it was too much for me. I listened to it for about 10 minutes and said, I got to put this away. I don't even. I mean, it's great, but it's just too much. You know, I can't absorb it right now. So I waited 2 weeks and then I started listening to it. Then being a kind of a, I guess you would call it a nerdy kid in some ways. I went to the library and I found all I could about all these people who played this music. Information. So that's kind of how it began, but as a listener. But I was playing with my father, organ, but we did some things like standards, but mostly we did covers, the stuff they played on the radio, because that's where you would stay employed. You couldn't really play like bebop and that kind of stuff or get anywhere. It's kind of like what Lou Donaldson said to me upon meeting me. Of course, he didn't know about your father. He didn't know about the jazz program at this time. But he asked me, where are you from? I said, Youngstown. He said, you're not going to be playing any kind of jazz at all coming from Youngstown. But that's where your father comes in. So I'm learning on my own. I ended up in the music program. I'm not even too sure whether I even wanted to play music. So, you know, I was playing. Obviously, I was playing in the church. I was playing with my father. I was playing a little bit of classical music. I was playing in high school. But while entering school, I realized that if I was going to play the piano, I was going to have to work because, well, I didn't have the proper finger strength I needed to really break down my whole technique in order to play properly, because the teacher that I had for many years never told me really how to play. She just let me play. So I played the best way I could, but then there are a lot of things I couldn't do. So I'm in school in the practice room and I hear someone play Ornithology practice by Charlie Parker, a saxophone player. I said, how can this be? And then I found out there was this jazz ensemble. So I didn't join the jazz ensemble because I was busy working on my technique. I was a music ed major. Then I became a music ed / piano performance major. Just got into the piano. But I went to every concert And I was kind of in the background lurking, checking everything out. Until Dave LaLama heard me play at the pub. You heard of the pub that they had at YSU, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the LaLamas used to play there all the time. So I decided to sit in one day. I have learned all this music by myself, like the stuff that they were playing and picking out things and trying to learn how to play voicings. And so I played. And he said, "You should be in the jazz ensemble. I'm going to introduce you to Tony." So they set up this jam session at James Master's house in the basement. And I played. First time I probably played those tunes with anybody. The tunes that we played that night. With a bunch of people who were really into playing jazz. So I played. I was having a good time. And I said to Tony, "Well, thank you so much. It was really nice to play with you." And he told me, "Well, you know, you were kind of busy all night on the piano behind everybody and then in their way, you know, very quietly." So that was my first lesson from him, you know. I said, "Well, I guess I better not do that again." He had this kind of soft way of saying things where he said, "That's not what you're supposed to do." I said, "Oh, okay." And so I tried to straighten it out. And that was kind of our relationship. You know, as a teacher, you know, he would just have to say this one little thing and you listen, and I would try to find some corrective measures not to do it again.
But I don't understand, what was the setting again? Where were you?
Oh, it was at a jam session with all the jazz ensemble people. I'm just meeting everybody for the first time. Now, I'm into my second or third year of college by this time.
Okay.
And they didn't know me from Adam's House Cat. They probably saw me around, but they didn't know that I played jazz or any of that kind of stuff. They probably said, "Oh yeah, he's that classical musician," or whatever. And so this was my first time of meeting everybody, meeting Tony. At a jam session, we were just playing tunes.
Ah, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was
In
a great
about
way.
what year?
Oh, it had to be early 75. I would say it could have been January or February, somewhere around there.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I had just finished my junior recital, and so I felt that I had hit a plateau in terms of my piano stuff is concerned. And I said, okay, now I think I can take this moment to really try to play more jazz with these people, because if I'm learning by myself, obviously I have a lot of holes. I needed to play with somebody because this music is about playing with people and learning. Yeah, it's only so much, you know, a young person like me can learn on his own playing that type of music. So that was my moment, I guess you could say. A great
So
one,
then
too.
So then after that, was that when you pursued the jazz ensemble as a member?
Yeah, as a member. And of course, there was no jazz studies program. It was just electives that people took. They had improv. But I was in the jazz ensemble one, and I divided the chair with Dave LaLama. We both shared the chair. That's the way it worked. And I think, 1976. There's a couple things that happened in between that time. I can just remember going to Orlando, Florida, playing with Bill Walters, who would come and mentor the band, and we would play with him. Just an incredible trombonist. Great technique, just beautiful sound, and that was always exciting for all of us. And when Thad Jones would come, and we would play his music for him, and he would do a master class with us. That was fantastic. Harold Dankel was with Thad Jones at that particular time, and Harold was very, I guess he was a charter member of the ensemble, really. He was very helpful to us and to me in particular. And these are just the type of things that Tony was able to bring to us to really help us understand the music on another level. The way that he would teach us is sometimes with the stories that he would tell, stories that he encountered when he was with Woody Herman. For instance, as a piano player, here's one that I remember. He was touring and they heard the John Coltrane Quartet with McCoy Tyner, Elvin Jones, Jimmy Garrison. McCoy was saddled with the worst piano in the world. I can only imagine that it had to be on the part of the piano that I learned how to play piano on, which was an upright piano that my dad bought when he went to Dana in 1948 for $50. Probably was never tuned. That was my first piano, and I played that piano for years. But so he's playing this piano, he's playing this tune on the trail. But Tony said, as bad as that piano was, McCoy did unbelievable things in playing that tune. Swinging. These little things, I think this is like the pinnacle of being a teacher, the fact that you can teach by telling those type of stories. Because for someone who would listen to it, then they understood what it is, in some cases, to overcome adversity and still let your musicianship shine.
Right. Exactly.
So, yes.
Were there other things that my dad taught you that have stuck with you through the years?
Yeah, he had a quotation. And again, it's these little small things. I always remember, from all my teachers, I always remember the little phrases. He had a favorite phrase that he would tell everybody. It's like, don't put square pegs in round holes. So everything had to be in its right place. If you play some stuff, you try to insert some stuff that wasn't supposed to be there, he would be very upset about that. That was like the mellow part of it. Just like you're just trying to put square pegs in round holes. There's other levels of that situation. And just the enthusiasm that he brought to the music. He was authentic. He was honest all the time. And so you really had to rise to the occasion. You couldn't come in there and just slouch. You had to be prepared to play. And you had to be passionate about what you're doing. And I think that you will find that from many of the members that you will talk to from that ensemble, they come away with that idea of being dedicated to what you're doing. And that was every day. The intensity that he would bring, and it was meaningful, and it was laser focused. So you had to rise to that. And if you didn't, you would get burned.
Right. Yep.
So that was very important. And I try in my teaching and in everything I do is just to really go into it with a certain type of dedication. Yeah, to really be serious minded. But
Right.
to have somebody like that, that's key. Just consider 1976, the Wichita Jazz Ensemble. Now, the reason YSU won the small group and big band was because we played something that was authentic. A lot of those groups, they were okay, but they were playing jazz rock. They weren't really playing what we would call is the meat of jazz. That, what I heard, was after we did that, then there were all these applications flying into Data for a non-existent jazz program.
Really?
Yes. After that situation, people were applying to Youngstown State University because of that. And you probably know the story. So they put the program in, but the bean counters didn't really understand that this man, Tony Leonardi, they didn't know. They didn't understand it. Even when the ensemble was there, people didn't really know what the jazz ensemble was doing. I would hear some of the professors say, "Oh, the jazz ensemble, is it any good?" They didn't know. They weren't really involved in that. They were just kind of insular into their own thing. But they were trying to get somebody else to hit the program at the beginning, right? The first year. And it was a disaster because they got somebody who probably had some letters after their name. Not somebody who had some real knowledge about how the music was supposed to be implemented.
Right. Oh, so that's when he was gone for a couple years and then he came back?
Yes. But that's the whole course, the bureaucracy of a university. You have to be this and that, you got to have this in order to do this type of job, to run a program.
Right.
Which has nothing to do with anything, really. It's like, what is your life experience? What can you bring to the program from that aspect? And Tony had all this knowledge in the world. And you see that a lot in jazz education today. A lot of people get a lot of letters after their name, never played with anybody, never interacted with anybody.
Right. And how valuable is that for students?
Yeah, it's difficult because it's a difficult situation. In New York City, a lot of students are fortunate because, at the various schools, you have people who actually played, and those are the people that the students are going to look up to. Reggie Workman, who worked with Coltrane and Art Blakey, he lives in my neighborhood, and he teaches at the News School. I'm sure that's just an invaluable person to be with, and he has a lot of education experience. He had his own school when I first came to New York. There's one example there. And at William Patterson, which Thad Jones started, there's a bunch of us who are there who've had many jobs in the business of jazz. We're the people who really make that school, and the people who do have the letters after their name, they know that, and they respect us for that. They understand what the balance is for people who have been on the field and what they bring to the table.
And that's how it should be.
Of course, in this music. I give you another story. This is not specifically about Tony, but it's just about education, music education in general. So my teacher was Marceline Hawk Mayhall. And so during this period of time that I was in the jazz ensemble, I'm still studying with her, and she liked jazz. But I said, in a few years, there's going to be a lot of jazz in the university. And she said, yeah, well, they'll kill it like they did classical music.
Oh my gosh.
But I think her point was that you have to be careful about the academic component seeping in the things that we just talked about. Of course, it can work as long as you got people from the field in there dealing with it. But the whole idea is like you got to keep it honest and authentic.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to the Wichita Jazz Festival, I didn't know that you played in that.
Oh, yes.
And didn't they sweep a lot of the awards that year?
Oh, man. Well, I think we were just in two situations, but we swept it. I think those were the two awards. And for the reasons I mentioned, I think Dave Lalonde, he wrote some arrangements for the small group, and Dave was writing some straight ahead killing stuff as a student. Then we were playing Thad Jones music with Jazz Ensemble Number 1. That was a great experience. So you had all the jazz musicians who were very vital in the education field, like Clark Terry. I remember Terry Lynn Carrington, a drummer who's been around for a long time. She was 9 or 11 years old, and Clark Terry had brought her to the Wichita Jazz Festival. I talked to Terry Lynn, and she told me, you know, that was the first time I had been out of Boston. That was like my real first experience playing in front of people on that level. And the fact that I remembered it, that was an interesting connection there. We got scholarships out of that to the Jamie Ebersol clinic. You know, those famous Jamie Ebersol things. And I met James Williams, who ended up being a director of jazz at William Patterson, who hired me to work there. He said, "You're my first hire." So I studied with him. There was Dave Baker, who was like, I guess you would say, the first jazz educator. I was in his ensemble. I think Joe Henderson was there. Oh, it was such a great experience. But I think because of what happened with the YSU Jazz Ensemble, because I had that scholarship, I had enough courage to say, okay, well, if I practice hard enough, you know, I'm back to this whole thing. I have to get myself together. It seems like, well, music is like that. If I practice hard enough, maybe I could leave Youngstown, go to New York. Ralph Lalama's there. I think maybe Glenn Richmond had already moved there, maybe. And there were a couple other people. Maybe I can make a life. So somehow, a couple years after which, I did end up in New York City. Still a little green, needed a little seasoning, but I had enough skills where I did survive. started gigging within, a few months and learning.
What are some highlights from your career after graduating from YSU?
Oh, well, I started working with some of the older musicians from the 40s and the 50s. John Ory was a good friend of mine, and he played with Thelonious Monk, and I used to love to play with him. And to play a Monk tune with him was like totally incredible because he put the beat exactly right where it was. Oh, that was just, I can't even explain it. Cecil Payne, who had played with Tad Dameron, I played with him a lot. I learned so much from musicians like that. And I guess one of my earliest really exciting moments before I really started working steadily with a band, because I was just freelancing, I would be a house musician. Yeah, house musician. Sometimes it would be people like Pepper Adams, Curtis Fuller. You know, you really had a chance to really learn just being on the bandstand with him. I mean, it was so incredible. But Sonny Stitt for 1 week, that had to be so incredible. Now, I remember your father, who was a former saxophone player, talking about Sonny Stitt, about the things he would do. You know, little musical things. Just pointing them out, offhand sometimes. I said, okay. In fact, your father, when he played bass at jam sessions, I would learn so much from him about the alternate type of harmonic moves that musicians were expected to know, because he would always play those things. I said, oh, so you're supposed to go here. There's a thing, technically, that's called sidestepping, where you go up a half step and you go down. So I knew Sonny Stitt was famous for that. Thanks to your father, because he taught me. So I have this gig for a week with Sonny Stitt. So I'm waiting for the time that he's going to do it. The first night he didn't do it. The second night he didn't do it. So I'm near the piano. So we're playing like a Secret Love, okay? Now the song usually goes like that. Now if you're going to sidestep, you'll go. See, it went up, okay? So it's probably with the third night. So this is what happened. Sonny's playing, he's playing his thing, and then when you get to that part, right before he put his bell, pointed it toward me. I knew, here it comes. And so he wanted me to play with him, so I played it with him. I was so happy, that I said, I was expecting that. I was expecting that, so I was ready for it. It was just like one of those little things that happened.
That's awesome. That is so awesome.
Yeah, I waited for that. Then when he pointed his bell at me, I said, it's coming. It's coming, that sidestepping situation. So
now, did you go back and tell Tony that?
I never had an opportunity, unfortunately, to tell him that. That's, that was a missed opportunity to. Boy, he would have gotten so much of a kick from that.
Oh, yeah.
But that was just one of those things. But my first long-standing gig was with Abby Lincoln. I played with her from 1982 until 1990. She was once married to Max Roach, and sometimes we would do things together with Abby and Max. I think they're on 3 separate occasions. Now, I'm not usually like mystical in this way about gigs, but I remember she had just come to New York and I was stopping in this club, Sweet Basil's, that used to exist, and she's singing with a group of musicians that I respected, but they weren't necessarily musicians that played behind singers, at least the piano player. So I was thinking, I was saying, you know what? That would be a nice gig for me. So I was talking to a friend of mine, a girlfriend at the time. I said, you know what? I'm going to go and get an application for a passport. She said, where are you going? I said, I don't know. It was like one of those things. So, I had this thing in my mind. I better get a passport together if I'm really thinking about working with Abby. But I never went up to her, never approached her or anything. But little did I know that because of a jam session I used to play, there were 2 young musicians who were lobbying for me to be in that band. I never told them anything. And so I get this call from her in July to do something in July, in Italy, which I totally missed because I was out of town. You had answering machines, no cell phones. But she said, well, that's all right. I have something in September. I'll call you then. And that's how it all began. But it's just one of those little things. I guess it was in the air. I just, when they say you think of something and then it might occur.
Yes. Yes.
I guess that was the one time when that actually happened.
The universe responded.
Yeah, the universe responded. And it was such a great experience because she was such a spiritual being in the songs that she wrote, and I learned a whole lot from her just in terms of being creative in your craft and how to be an artist in, again, an authentic sense, because she was an authentic person. Everything about her was in that direction. So
wow.
That was one pinnacle. Steve Coleman was the saxophone player who had recommended me. I was in his band, which was a cutting edge group. We were doing things that people weren't doing at that time. But some of the things are a little common now. They sort of seeped in to the vocabulary of many musicians because of what we did. It was a truly seminal group. An organization called M-Bass, where I could never remember what Michael Bass extemporaneous type of something, whatever, I never remember what it was, but we were playing, and sometimes there were things in mixed beaters, and there were all types of melodic and rhythmic and harmonic explorations that went into that music. It was quite interesting.
So you guys were kind of ahead of the time.
Yeah, right. We would catch a lot of flack. I remember the famous critic who recently took his last breath, Stanley Crouch, who would hear me often with Abby. And he didn't have good things to say about a lot of people, but he did like me, because we would play a concert and he would come up to me. Did you hear how quiet the audience was when you played that solo? So he really liked me. Now I'm going over here now. I'm doing this other stuff. I'm playing a synthesizer. And he said, "You're still doing that stuff?" He said, "I don't really understand." Oh boy, he just really laughed. And you have to understand, he was with Wynton Marsalis, which was really like, conservative and setting a certain standard. So for me to go off the deep end like that, that was unconscionable to him.
Right. But he took a liking to you, though. So.
Oh yes, no, he always did, because he liked Abby, so he heard me a lot, and whatever I was trying to do at that time, trying to develop as much as I could, for some people, like if you come out of Detroit or you come out of Memphis, you had more of that community, a lot of piano players and all those different things, and but there was me and Davey. We traded ideas, and there were a couple other people, but you really had to. For me, I had to come to New York, and then I had to just surround myself with the piano players in New York and to really learn a lot of vocabulary, and it takes a while, especially when I was fiddling around playing European classical music, and then I had all this other stuff that I played too. But I think those things helped me, just in terms of musicianship in general, to be able to play gospel music, a little bit of funk, and the different things. If you just can put the music together in the right place, then it's okay. I'm saying in terms of jazz, still be able to swing and play the blues or do whatever it requires to play that music. That's the ultimate thing. Where people say,
Right.
yeah, that's it. That's what the music is.
Exactly. Exactly. Going back to your experience at YSU, how many years were you in the jazz ensemble?
Only a couple.
Okay.
No, it was my last 2 years in school.
Last two.
Mm-hmm. But it was, as you can see, pretty concentrated, but it was pretty significant. And for the things that we talked about, for me, in that short
Right,
period
because
of
it
time.
led to everything that you later then accomplished when you went on to New York.
Exactly. No, yeah, it was highly significant. I don't think I would have even had come to New York if I hadn't been in the ensemble at that time.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know how I would have done it. Or if I made the decision, I said, by the same token, I made a decision that I was going to concentrate on the piano to really deal with that problem that I had of not being able to play correctly, which meant, I probably practiced 6, 7 hours a day, and I would spend the first hour just on technique by itself for the longest time to build it up. It probably had to do with, I kind of heard in some way how music was supposed to go, but it probably frustrated me that I couldn't do it. So I said, well, if I just practice, maybe I could do what I needed to do, because I could get my fingers to function the way that I thought they should function.
So you practice 6 to 7 hours a day?
Yeah, with a double major even. Yeah, just to get everything together. That's why I couldn't be in the jazz. So I was practicing so much, and then outside of that, I had jobs. I did everything from club dates. I had some church jobs and things like that. I had a pretty full plate in terms of it. Luckily, the courses were easy. I would always ask somebody, like if you had to take courses outside of music biology, I said, well, who's the easiest teacher? Which one doesn't give you a lot of work? I did that just for everyone. My favorite one was this. So I found this economics teacher, because, there were a few people teaching economics. At that time, it was the quarter system, whatever quarter. And I had, not only had I taken economics in high school, just as an elective, I didn't have to take it. Now, the only reason I took it was because my dad was trying to finish his degree in the 60s. He had an economics book. I was reading this. I said, okay, conceptually, I get this. So it was easy in high school. And so that class, I didn't even have to really go to. There was this nice, cute young lady who sat next to me. And I said, do you take good notes? He said, could I borrow your notes before the exam? And she said, fine. So I only went to that class maybe for a couple weeks. I would come in it, and then I got an A in the course because everything was note-based. And I already kind of knew the basic concepts of, what that was about. Economics, supply side, and et cetera, et cetera.
Right. That's funny.
Yeah, that's how I would buy my time, trying to find the teachers that weren't going to really load you down with a whole bunch of extra work. I said, look, I'm in music school. I have to really I would just buy time so I would have time to practice.
Right. Well, that makes sense. I mean, you only have so many hours in a day, so
right.
You might as well allocate them to what you want.
Yeah. And before I joined the jazz ensemble, and after too, the way I would deal with jazz, I practiced that more in the summer, but I would listen at night, and I would, Martin Berger had a fantastic program, which he's still on the radio. I mean, that was just a wealth of information. There was a guy named Harry Abraham out of Rochester. I would record, and that's the way I would just listen, and that was the way that I would really try to absorb the sounds, how the music was supposed to go, so to speak.
Have you been back to Youngstown at all in the last couple of years?
You know, my wife and I, because she likes to get out of New York. So we talked about this often. He said, boy, this has really been a drag because, you know, we travel, we can't go anywhere. And then you're afraid to go anywhere. But today we actually went to Stop and Shop. And we did some shopping. So that was our excursion. And that's always great. I mean, we have a good time just being able to leave on any type of level. But so I said that to say that we would start to go to Youngstown every maybe a couple times out of the year.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I started reconnecting with some of my old friends, and we would hang out and do things. It was like that type of scene before this thing hit.
Right.
So really, I hadn't been back since my father died, and we had the funeral a year ago, December, and that's the last time I've been here. So we hadn't even been able to drive to go to the gravesite or any of that type of thing.
So I'm so sorry.
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting too because he was a military man, and just today we took the flag out of the trunk of my car because we cleaned out some things. I had it like folded up in a box or whatever. But that's true. But yeah, that was been my big connection. Just getting back there, we would stay in some hotel, motel somewhere, and just enjoyed driving around wherever and meeting friends and stay for a few days and get out of New York because it's not that far from it's not that far from New York.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
How would you feel about performing in a tribute concert for my father? I know that you're aware of how I'm trying to organize this for the next couple years.
Oh, I think that's the greatest idea, Paula. You know, I would be very happy to do that.
Oh, thank you.
It would be such a great reunion to see all the people who came after, even before. And it was not a tradition that happened all the time, but Tony would bring us back. I think we even made an album, you know, to play together. That was a delight, just to see all these people together. You know, there was something, I guess you posted it, from 1993. I have to listen to that whole concert. But
yes.
Oh my God. You know, just listening to how that band just started out, how they were playing. I mean, it was just, it was almost otherworldly.
It was. It really, actually, Jim Wilpula posted that. He had that in his collection.
Oh.
And he digitized it. And that band, I was at those concerts. I remember just, you know, you couldn't even, and everyone has said this in the interviews, you couldn't even walk. It was just standing room only, packed to the gills. And people would be out in the lobby, out in other rooms, just to be able to hear the concerts.
Oh, man. And my father, he just enjoyed going to those concerts.
Oh, you know, did he go?
Oh, yes. He was kind of like a concert goer emeritus after a while. You know, but he made sure he would check that out. He would talk about it sometimes when we would talk, but he really loved Tony, and he really loved those concerts. He really loved what he did with those students. I mean, because he came up in the big band era, and that was one of the things, like I said, coming from Meridian, Mississippi, that he brought, just being able to hear that music. And he loved the music. He remembered coming out to service and hearing how the music had changed from that time. The so-called bebop style came into being. So, no, he was a great admirer of your father and
Oh,
what he did for that program.
that's wonderful to hear.
Oh, absolutely.
If you were to talk to somebody who had never had the opportunity to meet Tony, how would you describe him?
Oh, I would, again, I just would have to go to the fact of this person who had this passion, this unique passion for the music. And he was really about the music swinging and being correct. And he was inspiring. You know, those are qualities, I mean, you can't even quantify. You would just have to be under that type of aura of somebody like that. You know, just the thing that I think I heard in a previous interview, I can't remember who, the fact that not only as a teacher, being in front of them, being the teacher, but the fact that he could play the bass. And the way that he played the bass, with all that passion and everything. Melissa Slocum, I remember she's in New York, and she studied with him when she was going to the Catholic school, Ursuline. And I saw Melissa for a long time. She sort of, I said, man, that's a Tony move. She would kind of move like him with that kind of stuff when she played the bass, just that kind of passion, just putting your whole body into this situation. And that in itself means a lot. I mean, that's somebody who's really, when they're in the music, they're just the music.
Right.
You better be about the music too.
Yes. And respect it.
Exactly. That's it. You know, I have to tell this story. I think I had mentioned Glenn Wilson. I mentioned his name wrong. I was thinking about another Glenn. We had a group. Well, Glenn put together a group called Pressure Point. This was an experimental group. And so I think he invited Tony to come to hear us. Now, there was a lot of squeaking and squawking going on and all this stuff. And one thing, Tony was a dyed-in-the-wool, straight-ahead player, so, and musician. So after it was over, Tony sort of had his head down. He said, I don't know why Glenn did, why you guys did that. You know, I respected it so much. You know, it was kind of because I knew where he was coming from. I knew he wasn't going to like it, but it was just one of those situations that it was kind of blasphemous what we had did that night. The experiment on that level. And the fact that, you know, he didn't yell at us. People were just like depressed that we would even, or like he was a failure. He said, you know, I told you all these things and this is what you ended up doing.
Was it more of a contemporary or avant-garde style?
Avant-garde, yeah. You know,
okay.
You know, he was like, oh my God, what have I done?
Oh no. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
no, he was definitely honest. Yeah.
Oh yes. And again, you know, he just felt that. I mean, he just felt remorse. He felt remorse for us as well. That we would even do such a dastardly thing. Like play avant-garde? Are you kidding me? I mean, I just told you about what Sonny Stitt did, you know, sidestepping and all that kind of stuff. And all these other, you know, things that go into the music. And this is what we ended up doing that night. Not the complete night. We did play a couple standards. But we had some music that was really a little provocative, shall we say.
And how long was that band together?
Oh, we only did a few things. I think I actually have a reel-to-reel of one of those concerts that I haven't listened to for years, and I don't even know where my real player even works. That's how bad it is.
Oh,
But upon thinking about it, one day I may put it on just to see exactly what we sounded like.
you should. That would be
Yeah.
great to go back and listen to.
It sure would be. Well, I haven't. Yeah.
Well, speaking of reel to reels, I was just telling somebody that I got the Wichita Jazz Festival on reel to reel. I got that digitized.
You mean
So
from 76?
yes, yes,
Oh.
I found it in my dad's thing. So I'd like to get that posted.
Wow, that would be really something.
It would, for everyone, especially the band members, to hear that after all these years.
Yes, exactly. And that in itself, in my opinion, is what created a bona fide jazz studies program at YSU because of going to the Wichita Jazz Festival.
Now, what makes you say that? Because I really don't know much about it at all. So what about that
Well,
kind of solidified the program?
Well, what I heard that people started asking about the program, a non-existent program, after we had won. Because, look, we beat North Texas State. That was the premier jazz studies program in all the United States. And we came out of nowhere. This was like Davy and Goliath in that respect. So they said, well, North Texas State, well, who are they? YSU, Dana School of Music? What is it? Oh, they started sending in, they started making inquiries. And so, of course, if you have the provost or whoever, they said, well, maybe we should start a jazz program because all these people asking about this, more students. It becomes like that type of thing. He said, so maybe this is possible to create such a thing at the school. People started really thinking about it.
So at that point,
supply and demand.
Yeah, there you go. There's the economics. At that point, what was it then? If it wasn't an actual program?
It was an elective.
Oh, I see.
So you had the jazz band number 1, 2. You had the improv. I think those were the 3 things.
So you couldn't major in it.
You could not major in it.
Okay.
See, I'm one of the old guys.
An accredited program. Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Wow.
But see, if you just talk about the Wichita Jazz Festival, even though our ensemble was beginning to be known within like the international jazz educators because of us playing with Bill Walters, and there were all these little things, but just that alone, it tells you a lot about the legacy of Tony Leonardi. The fact that this was just something on the side that people could elect to do, and he was putting all this passion into creating this thing. So that's why, somebody who really wasn't familiar with the jazz thing, they knew that some people were playing jazz. They said, well, is it any good? Is anything really going on there? But for someone who had ears, like I'm a freshman, and I hear somebody actually playing ornithology, I said, if somebody's playing ornithology, there is some jazz happening here at Youngstown State University. I immediately knew because I was listening to the music.
Right.
It was obvious to me. It wouldn't be obvious to somebody who wasn't familiar what it takes to know whatever you need to know. And how would you know that unless there was somebody at the head of the helm that said, well, you need to know this, so you need to learn this, or this is the tools you need.
Exactly. Exactly. Wow. I didn't know a lot of that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, and you could talk to maybe some of the other people who are in that ensemble, more about that whole situation. So now that puts everything in another context. When you think about even as this elective, we were bringing in all these people. I mean, whatever you had to do in order to raise money, or I don't know. I can't remember what they did when they did. But they had some ways where they were able to get some funding to bring in a Thad Jones. Later on, they had a jazz society. And even without a jazz program, we were still going to school, these high schools and performing all the time. There were all these gigs that we would do throughout the Youngstown area and Boardman and Austintown. It was
Really?
just, yeah, it was just incredible the things that we would do, and everybody was dedicated. Not being a major, not being something that we needed to do. I had a situation I'd never forget because I was in the piano performance. Finally, I kind of gravitated to that along with music ed. And so Harwitz, who was an old man, he was performing in Cleveland. So I had planned to go, but then Tony had a gig that same day. I said, "Oh, Tony, I was planning to go to hear Harwitz." I said, "Well, you're going to have to decide what you want to do. Do you want to play classical music? You want to play this music?" I said, so you know what I did? I never saw Horowitz.
That was that, huh?
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's no question. I would have been persona non grata if I had said I'm going to see Horowitz. So.
Oh my gosh. Are there any other Tonyisms that you remember? Things that he was known for saying?
Oh, that I can mention here?
Yeah. Or not?
Well, those are some of the ones that I'm thinking of or that I can remember. Those are the ones that really stick to my mind. Those type of things. I remember the little incidents that we discussed. If he didn't like anything, I remember. And again, this is an aesthetic thing. So someone must have played for him this McCoy Tyner record with Ron Carter playing. So Ron Carter has this thing that he does where he sort of just slides on the bass. So he was taking this bass solo, he was going woo woo woo, something like that. Tony did not dig it at all. He said, "Yeah, Rob, you play such and such a thing better than he plays that." It was just like Tony did not dig it. He said, he said, "Yeah, I have a bass player play better than him." So there were certain things, there were certain limitations. Like you couldn't go out a certain type of area with Tony. You had to be pretty strict and on point.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a theme for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But he knew how to bring out the best
Absolutely.
in people.
Year after year. Year after year. Yeah. Just doing that. And that's that X factor that if you're trying to describe him to somebody else, that's a quality, very special quality that you just have to be in the presence to witness, to feel it, to feel that energy.
Right.
It's not something you can write down. You say, okay, this is chapter 1. This is how you do it. It's chapter 2, chapter 3. It's the X factor that he had.
Yes.
And that was very important. And he could back up everything that he talked about too. And that's why, Thad would hear our band, and once Thad said, "Man, you're playing this music better than we do."
Thad Jones said that?
Yeah, it was something that we played, and we just played it so well. I'll tell you something else. You just reminded me of something. I remember we did our last concert. A lot of us was graduating. So there was this song from Sweet from Pops, Thad Jones. And I should have looked it up. It's Goodbye Something, okay? And it's a ballad, kind of bittersweet sounding. And we all just loved each other. So Tony, he's conducting, we're playing the song. I don't know whether it was Goodbye Pops or whatever. And tears start streaming down his face because this was the last concert we all were going to have together. And just that emotion that he had at that moment of us playing it. We were playing it. We were playing the heck of it. We were really playing it. But that was just a really emotional moment at that particular time. I'll never forget that.
Oh my gosh. I never knew my dad to get that emotional at a concert.
Yeah, that was the
That
one
must have
time.
been something.
And I think that was after the accomplishments that we had, winning the Wichita Jazz Festival, those awards, and we had accomplished a lot, and we did all those little type of performances in the high school, and I think he was just acknowledging the hard work that we had done, that we were inspired to do because of him, to do that.
Right. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a beautiful moment. Really a beautiful, poignant moment.
Yeah, for sure. Wow, what a great memory.
Mm. Yeah, I don't have too many of them, but I guess I have the important ones.
Yeah.
When you go back and say, oh man, you go through the years, you try to put everything together. But I have a lot of great vivid memories, episodes, I guess we can say, of YSUs. And those are part of the episodic things that I can remember.
Oh. Well, thank you so much, James, for everything. And thank you for your time and contributing to this project.
Oh, man, it was my pleasure. I just enjoyed chatting with you about this. I think this is really a great project, and I think the whole idea of all the alum coming together is another great part. We shouldn't forget, for everything that has happened to Youngstown throughout all these years. And see, I grew up when Youngstown was still vibrant. Everybody had a job. You didn't have to worry about those type of things. And now, to see it, of course, it's another part of the whole Rust Belt phenomenon. And every time you write about Youngstown, you write about how depressed it was. But anything that we can do to uplift the virtues of what went on in our fair city, that's very important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is so true. Yes, that's important.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. Yes, and I mean it.
Oh, well, thank you. And I wish you all of the best. I will be in touch with you and keep you posted on everything.
Okay, then I'll be looking forward to it.
Okay. Well, you
All right.
take care until we speak again, and thank you so much again.
Okay then. Okay. You have a
Okay.
great one, Paula, and thank you.
You too, James. Thank you.
And bye.
Bye. Bye.